At exactly 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Emily Carter, the powerful CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, sat alone in her glass office overlooking the glowing skyline of Chicago. The city sparkled with holiday lights, but inside her office, the silence felt heavy. Her employees believed she had everything: success, money, influence. But tonight, Emily stared at her phone with a strange emptiness in her chest. Without thinking much, she opened a message draft meant only for herself. It was something she did every Christmas, a small tradition where she wrote down her secret wish. She typed slowly, "I wish someone would remind me what real family feels like." Emily sighed and pressed send. But the message didn't go to her private notes. It went to Daniel Brooks, a single father who had emailed her company earlier that week asking for help after losing his job. Across the city, Daniel was sitting at a small kitchen table in his modest apartment, while his 6-year-old daughter slept on the couch beside a tiny Christmas tree decorated with paper stars. His phone buzzed. Confused, he opened the message from the CEO whose company he had just contacted. Daniel read the line again. "I wish someone would remind me what real family feels like." For a moment, he hesitated. Most people would ignore a message like this. But Daniel quietly typed back, "Ma'am, if you'd like, you're welcome to join us for Christmas breakfast tomorrow. It's not fancy, but it's real." When Emily's phone buzzed with his reply, she froze. One simple message. One unexpected invitation. And without realizing it yet, that single moment was about to change both of their lives forever. Emily stared at the message on her phone for several seconds. A stranger had just invited her, a billionaire CEO, to Christmas breakfast. She almost laughed at how unbelievable it sounded. Her life was filled with luxury restaurants, private parties, and business meetings, yet none of them had ever felt warm or genuine. But this message felt different. "It's not fancy, but it's real." Those words echoed in her mind. Across the city, Daniel Brooks sat quietly at the small kitchen table, wondering if he had made a mistake. Maybe inviting a powerful CEO into his tiny apartment had been foolish. After all, he was just a struggling single dad trying to make ends meet. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, stirred on the couch and rubbed her sleepy eyes. "Daddy, is Santa coming?" she whispered. Daniel smiled gently. "Of course he is," he said softly, even though he had barely managed to afford a few small gifts. Just then, Emily picked up her phone again. Her fingers hovered above the screen. For years, Christmas had meant empty dinners, quiet penthouses, and business calls instead of laughter. She had built an empire, but somewhere along the way, she had lost the feeling of belonging. Finally, she typed a reply. "Thank you. I'd like that." Daniel blinked in disbelief when he read the message. The CEO was actually coming. The next morning, snow began to fall gently across the city as Emily Carter stepped out of a black car and stood in front of a modest apartment building. For the first time in years, she felt nervous. Not about a business deal. Not about investors. But about knocking on the door of a stranger who had offered her something she hadn't felt in a long time. A place at a real Christmas table. Emily stood outside the small apartment door, snowflakes settling gently on her coat. For a woman used to commanding boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations, it felt strangely difficult to simply knock. But after a quiet breath, she raised her hand and tapped on the door. Inside, Daniel hurried across the tiny living room. Lily was already awake, sitting on the couch in her pajamas and watching the snow fall through the window. "Daddy, someone's here!" she whispered excitedly. Daniel opened the door and froze. Standing there was the CEO he had only seen in news articles. Emily Carter looked different from the confident woman on magazine covers. Up close, she seemed human, slightly nervous even. "Hi," Emily said softly. "I hope I'm not too early." Daniel quickly stepped aside. "No, not at all. Please come in." The apartment was warm but simple. A tiny Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with handmade paper stars. The smell of pancakes filled the air. Emily looked around quietly. Nothing about this place was expensive, but it felt alive in a way her luxurious penthouse never did. Lily tilted her head curiously. "Are you Daddy's friend?" she asked. Emily smiled, kneeling slightly to meet her eyes. "I think I'm hoping to be." Lily grinned and grabbed her hand without hesitation. "Good. Then you can help us eat pancakes." Daniel laughed awkwardly, but Emily laughed too, an honest, unexpected laugh she hadn't felt in years. For a few minutes, everything felt surprisingly normal. But as Emily sat at the small table with them, she noticed something that made her heart tighten. There were only 2 plates on the table. Daniel quietly reached into the cupboard to grab another. Emily realized something then. He hadn't expected her to actually come. Yet somehow, this small family had still made room for her. Daniel quickly placed a 3rd plate on the table, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry," he said with a shy smile. "I didn't really think you'd actually come." Emily shook her head gently. "I'm glad I did." Lily happily poured syrup on the pancakes, carefully pushing the plate toward Emily as if serving a very important guest. "Here," she said proudly. "These are Daddy's best pancakes." Emily took a bite, and for a moment she just sat there, surprised. They weren't perfect, but they were warm, homemade, and shared with laughter. Somehow, they tasted better than any meal she had eaten in the most expensive restaurants. The small kitchen filled with simple conversation. Lily talked about school, her drawings, and how she had written a letter to Santa asking for a puppy. Daniel mostly listened, smiling at his daughter, though Emily noticed the quiet exhaustion in his eyes. Eventually, she asked softly, "So, what happened with your job?" Daniel hesitated for a second before answering. "The company downsized last month," he explained. "I've been trying to find work ever since." He shrugged as if it didn't matter, but Emily could see the worry behind his calm expression. Yet despite everything, the little apartment was full of warmth. That was when Lily suddenly looked at Emily with innocent curiosity. "Why were you sad last night?" she asked. Daniel looked surprised. "Lily." But Emily gently raised her hand. "It's okay." She looked at the little girl and spoke honestly. "Sometimes, when people work too much, they forget how to have a family." Lily thought about that for a moment. Then she slid a small paper star from the Christmas tree and placed it in Emily's hand. "Now you have one," she said sweetly. And in that quiet moment, something inside Emily Carter's heart began to change. Emily looked down at the small paper star resting in her hand. It was simple, just folded paper with a bit of glitter, but to her, it felt more valuable than anything in her expensive office. "Thank you," she said softly to Lily. For the rest of the morning, the tiny apartment filled with laughter. Lily opened her small Christmas presents, showing Emily every toy with excitement. Daniel poured more coffee, still slightly amazed that the most powerful woman he had ever heard about was sitting comfortably at his kitchen table. For the first time in years, Emily forgot about meetings, deadlines, and business deals. She simply enjoyed the moment. Eventually, she stood near the window, watching the snow fall gently outside. Daniel walked over, a little nervous. "I hope this morning wasn't too simple," he said. Emily turned toward him, shaking her head. "Daniel, this is the best Christmas morning I've had in years." He looked surprised. Emily hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You emailed my company last week asking for help," she said. "I read your message myself." Daniel looked down, slightly embarrassed. "I just needed a chance," he admitted. Emily smiled thoughtfully. "Well, I think I may have one." Daniel looked up, confused. "My company needs someone honest, hardworking, and responsible," she explained. "Someone who understands what really matters." Daniel blinked in disbelief. "Are you saying?" Emily nodded. "I'm offering you a job." Lily suddenly cheered, jumping happily on the couch. But as Daniel stood there speechless, Emily looked again at the small paper star in her hand. Last night, she had sent one lonely Christmas wish. And somehow, a single dad and his little girl had answered it in the most beautiful way possible.